John, with that storm still more than 36 hours out, conditions here are already beginning to kick up. We're seeing some wind gusts of 20 miles an hour, and Biscayne Bay is already overtopping its walls here. There is a very different mood in South Florida around this storm. In previous storms, there'd be some braggadocio about sticking it out, riding it out. There is a real palpable fear here when you talk to people. People who haven't left in previous storms are leaving this time around. There is a fear because of what people have seen already from this storm throughout the day and the utter destruction it has already caused in the Caribbean, making
Really? We don't talk like this at home.
It's called Daddy and DirecTV.
I would never say any of these words out loud. I wouldn't. I mean, I think it, but it's an artistic expression.
Good to know.
Even though DirecTV now says they're $10 a month, it's not. Can't get it without their wireless plan, so it's 10 times more than they say. And there's no NFL network. And there's
I just can't have this on the wall.
No,
Obviously.
Of course not. It's artistically, though, very good.
John, with that storm still more than 36 hours out, conditions here are already beginning to kick up. We're seeing some wind gusts of 20 miles an hour, and Biscayne Bay is already overtopping in South Florida as a Category 4. They know what that means here. They've been through it in the past. It could mean down tree lines, down power lines, roofs ripped off of houses, exterior walls ripped off. So we're already seeing people go into shelters at this early time. People are taking this seriously. And that evacuation, the window to get out, is narrowing each hour. Miami International Airport, the last American flight, that's its hub, will leave in about 2 hours' time. Other major airports shut down. Keep in mind, when the wind speed gets over 55 miles per hour, there'll be no planes coming in or landing. As far as the road for I-95, there are scenes where people are trying to flee and running out of gas, creating more log jams. In some places, we're seeing 4,000 cars an hour pass. And one reason why this is so problematic, this evacuation, to get safe, you practically have to leave the entire state of Florida. So if you're down here, you have to drive all the way into Georgia to try and get out of the path of this storm. John, back to you.
Yeah, what a mess. Steve Harrigan. Steve, thank you.
John, with that conditions in South Florida around this storm. In previous storms, there'd be some braggadocio about sticking it out, riding it out. There is a real palpable fear here when you
on Irma, White House correspondent John Roberts. He's the big cheese over there for us. What he makes of that, what the president is going to be doing. He's even getting good reviews from the guy who was running against him for president, Jeb Bush. So he obviously wants to build on that. What are you hearing?
Yeah, good afternoon to you, Neil. The president left for Camp David a short time ago. He arrived there just about 20 minutes later. And the president will spend the weekend there with his full cabinet. It will be the fourth time that the entire cabinet has gotten together. Some members of the cabinet coming up tonight. The rest won't come up until tomorrow because there's not enough room for everybody to sleep over. They'll go over the fall agenda and the plans for getting some of the president's agenda through Congress. And they'll also keep a very close eye on Hurricane Irma. As he was walking out of the Oval Office with wife Melania, the first lady, on his way to the helicopter, the president gave us the latest assessment of where things stand with the federal response. So I've got to tell you, it's a little bit difficult to hear this. Listen. the federal response is ramped up. Tom Bossert, who is the Homeland Security Advisor, said that the emergency responders are rested up and recharged and ready to go after Hurricane Harvey. One of the big problems, though, because the federal response right now is really geared toward life-saving and getting people out of harm's way. Neil, there's not a whole lot of gasoline, particularly in the South Florida area. They've waived the requirements that only U.S.-flagged ships can carry petroleum products. They're docking at the ports. A lot of the tanker trucks that bring gasoline to the stations are now receiving escorts by police. But Tom Bossert admitted when he was briefing us earlier today that the window of opportunity to get gasoline into the area that needs it most is quickly closing. Listen here.
The conditions will dictate that. I don't think there'll be too much more that we can get in. At some point here, they'll have to stop those operations. And again, that's one of my messages here. It's not a tough love message. It's just a message of clarity and honesty. At some point, people are going to be on their own, so to speak, for a period of time during which the flooding, the raining, and the wind bear down on them. And they need to be prepared.
Bossert, who's also gotten high marks, I should say, Neil, for his handling of the last disaster, Harvey, and this one coming up, and who knows what's going to happen with Jose, saying people need to be prepared to hunker down and take care of themselves for a period of about 72 hours. And Neil, sorry about the difficulty with the audio and the president. We finally convinced him to talk to us. So we're standing on the rope line, watching him go to the helicopter. Now we just got to get him to get a little closer to us so that we can hear him.
But fortunately, those letters animated out and said what he said. So that was brilliant how you handled that. John Roberts.
We do what we can.
I know. Thank you, my friend, very, very much. John Roberts at the White House. Well, you know, 90 House Republicans voted against that bill extended government funding and aid for Hurricane Harvey. Now, my next guest was among them, not because he didn't think that Harvey deserved the aid, but because of the way it was handled and what it was linked to. Mark Walker is his name, North Carolina Congressman, House Republican Study Committee Chairman. Congressman, very good to have you.
Neil, thank you.
Explain your position here. You don't like the way it was handled, right?
No, we don't. In fact, those 90 conservative Republicans actually voted for Harvey funding on Wednesday. What happened in the Senate when we attached a kind of a backroom deal measure to raise the debt ceiling, that was the problem. This has been a problem for the last several years, continuing to raise the debt limit, adding more to our national debt without any kind of meaningful reforms. In fact, 2014, only 24 Republicans voted for raising the debt ceiling. We understand the ramifications. We're not against or opposed raising the debt ceiling. What we're just asking for is some simple reforms that long-term bend that bell curve of spending.
Then how do you feel, Congressman, about the president coming up with this measure with Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi? He says to sort of clear the decks. For addressing the tax package in the next few weeks.
Listen, Congress, and I believe the grade of the 115th Congress will come full present over the next 2 to 3 months, 60 to 90 days. I believe we should be able to do both, be competent enough that we can work on tax reform while also making sure that we are trimming the spending. That's what many of these 90 conservatives, they're the ones that have been out front supporting the Trump administration, the Trump agenda. I was a little disappointed to see how this manifested itself, and even with the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin coming to our conference this morning, I will tell you it did not go over well.
What happened?
Well, basically, there were questions asked that couldn't be answered. Specifically, I asked the question, what reforms were ever considered? There was no answer to that. I also asked the question, what does the debt ceiling look like December the 9th? Still no answer to
Talk to people. Afraid if this storm does indeed hit South Florida as a Category 4, they know what that means here. They've been through it in the past. It could mean
Schumer and Pelosi. We're hoping that was just maybe a one-time sending the message, but we have sent out 19 reforms.
Sending the message to whom? To Republicans or to everyone? Get on board.
Well, maybe everyone get on board. I don't think his message is just reserved for Republicans, but we sent out 19 different reforms. We were not asking for all 19.
Well, lately, he's been zinging Republicans a lot more than Democrats. In fact, you were mentioning the debt cert. One of his ideas apparently he's working on with Chuck Schumer, maybe Republicans, I just haven't heard that, is to erase this whole, debt dilemma every time it comes up every 14, 15 months, just stop it.
It would be a concern because as crude as it is, the debt ceiling is one of the few opportunities that we have to bend back that bell curve, whether it's Medicaid reforms, whether it's making the CBO more transparent, or even putting other amendments or reforms to it. That's the vehicle that we must use to be able to do something Republicans promised to do, and that is to watch our federal spending.
All right. Sir, thank you very, very much. Very good having you.
Thank you, Neil.
All right. Remember when Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was on her talking about price gouging ahead of Irma and that if anyone was trying to get away with it, she'd cite them, name them, and actually move to arrest them. She did. Followed up on that promise. Here, next.
We're out of the office. That doesn't mean you're not working. At Men's Warehouse, we'll help you find a look to close any deal. Now it's buy one, get one free on select items, plus take an additional 40% off clearance. Your clients are gonna like the way you look.
Bill assumed it was a costume party.
Florida, and it's, as you say, quite destructive.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we are certainly keeping an eye on Florida right now as the mass exodus continues. A lot of traffic heading north. No traffic is heading south. And I heard stories about how water right now is more expensive than gas, and gas is running out. Less is what they can expect as Irma continues to make its way west-northwest. Puerto Rico, 150 to 500 millimeters of rain. Dominican Republic, 100 to 375. Same with Haiti and Cuba. That's a lot of rain. This storm has three parts. Obviously, the winds. We know they're very strong. It's a Category 5, might diminish to a Category 4. We also have to talk about the waves. The waves hitting the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos.
extending out about 70 miles to 75 miles from the center. So even if the eye of the storm ends up 75 miles away from you, you can still feel hurricane force winds. We are under a number of watches and warnings. We've got a hurricane watch in effect for Okeechobee County and the Treasure Coast, hurricane warning for Lake Okeechobee and Palm Beach County. We've got storm surge warnings in effect from Jupiter Inlet all the way south and around South Florida. Here's the latest track for the Hurricane Center. Winds at 150 miles per hour, possibly re-strengthening a bit back up to winds with 155 miles per hour and staying a major hurricane as it most likely makes landfall in South Florida on Sunday. Moving up through our viewing area, it is likely to still be a major hurricane, but then begin to weaken as it makes its way up towards central Florida, up to Georgia and eventually Kentucky and Tennessee.
We continue to track Hurricane Irma. The new 5 a.m. advisory on Hurricane Irma is just in from the National Hurricane Center. The powerful storm is battering the southeastern Bahamas and has its sights set on South Florida.
It sure does. And we have weather team coverage for you this morning. Meteorologist Dave Warren standing by with details on the impact here locally. First, though, let's get the latest on Irma with meteorologist Lisette Gonzalez.
Hey, Gene and Lauren, and good morning to all of you at home. Unfortunately, we're not having any good news this morning with the latest 5 a.m. advisory. Really not much has changed. Irma is still a Category 4 hurricane. Now, the winds have decreased, but only slightly. 155 mile per hour sustained winds right now and moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. It is located 55 miles northwest of Great Inagua Island, and it is forecast to move west-northwest and maybe a little bit more on a westerly track here as we look ahead throughout the night tonight into tomorrow. Could be moving across the northern coast of Cuba or just north of this island, and then of course taking that turn to the north. When that turn happens will determine whether we see that eye stay offshore or directly make landfall across South Florida, but it is looking more and more likely that we will see a direct impact here. As right now, the National Hurricane Center is forecasting that the center of Irma could be right over the Upper Keys as we head into Sunday morning or around Sunday late morning midday, and then likely continuing to move northward up the spine of the state of Florida. Pretty much everyone is included in that cone here, and it'll continue to move up the state of Florida as we head in through even Monday. So this is going to be a long duration event, and yes, it is looking like it could be destructive and even life-threatening. So please take the necessary measures to prepare if you haven't done so already. Then a tropical storm moving into the southeast, Georgia, the Carolinas as we head into early next week. Now, we are seeing the highest threat for hurricane winds across South Florida and even parts of the Keys, and that is the reasoning behind a hurricane warning in place for all of South Florida and also parts of the Bahamas, Cuba. Hurricane watch is now starting to go up along the east and west coast side here of parts of central Florida, and we're going to likely continue to see those watches and warnings going up for the entire state. Storm surge warnings, watches in place because we could see life-threatening storm surge anywhere from 3 to 10 feet. And in terms of the tropical storm force wind probabilities, of course, that is high, remains high, and we will be dealing with tropical storm force winds and also the likelihood of hurricane force winds. So when will we see those gusty squalls and tropical storm force winds arrive? Well, as soon as tonight, and that means our window of opportunity to prepare, it is closing. Time is running out, and you will really need to hunker down as soon as tonight, but especially by tomorrow morning. Rainfall potential, well, we could see anywhere from 8 to 12 inches of rain through the weekend, potentially up to 20 inches of rain in some spots. So yes, we could see some flooding due to some heavy rain, but taking a look at Irma as it continues to slam king conditions expected in the next 36 hours. The worst period will be tonight and especially tomorrow, Sunday through Monday. Threats, extreme winds, devastating storm surge, flooding, heavy rain, and even the risk of tornadoes. For more on what you can expect, we have meteor.
Don't forget your prescriptions.
Yeah, and if they don't, you're going to post their picture on the internet. It's going to get ugly. I have the feeling. Pam Bondi, seriously, thank you very, very much. Be safe yourself. All right, in the meantime, some shelters in Broward County are already filled to capacity or will be shortly as these mandatory evacuations to Pam Bondi's point remain in effect and keep growing and spreading. On the phone, Broward Emergency Manager Director Miguel Escaruins. Miguel, thank you very much for taking the time. So you're prepared for the worst. I know the drill. You hope for the best, but what's it looking like?
Yeah, right now we have 14 shelters that are open, and additional shelters will be open as needed. As of this morning, there are nearly 5,500 people in shelters, but we do have a capacity of more than 12,000 out of those 14. Total capacity, we could open up to 38 of our general population shelters for a total of 33,000 as far as capacity. So we're closely monitoring the population census in each of our open shelters to ensure we're opening additional for our residents who may need to go there quickly throughout the evening. We also, by the way, have one pet-friendly shelter reach capacity earlier today. So we identified an additional pet-friendly shelter. It opened a couple hours ago at 1 p.m. and it's filling up quickly. So we'll be ready to identify another pet-friendly shelter probably later this evening.
Director, are these shelters that are open, these are schools for the most part, right? I mean, and then obviously the governor opted to keep the schools closed until at least Monday of next week. The assumption being that even if they're in those shelters through the weekend, they'll certainly not need them beyond that?
Yeah, in the state of Florida, we use schools because they're enhanced, reinforced for hurricanes, for wind. And so in terms of how long we keep the populace there, we would like to get them transitioned to what we refer to as recovery shelters as quickly as possible post-event. So it could be a week, within a week. Or 2 weeks at the most, we're thinking. And we have our recovery shelters identified. And that'll further develop our transitional plan for intermediate housing needs that we're going to be anticipating. But we do want to open up the schools as quickly as possible, and that's why we've identified additional community centers. And in fact, we have one or a couple of options for a mega recovery shelter.
All right, Director, hang in there. Thank you for all you're doing. We appreciate it. All right, Orlando is not exactly in the immediate path of this storm, but the house that Mickey built in Universal and SeaWorld, they're not that far away. What they're doing to prepare.
USAA to me means peace of mind. We had a power outage for 5 days total. We lost a lot of food. We actually filed a claim to USAA to replace that spoiled food. We really appreciated that.
In fact, it was mentioned by the Disney CEO Iger yesterday as among the catalysts for a drop-off in expected profits here. Gary Kalpon, on the fallout ahead of the storm that hasn't even formally arrived. What do you make of this, Gary?
I think it's the right thing to do. You know, when you have thousands of employees and you have upwards of maybe 100-mile-per-hour winds, very tough to move them around and just put them into crosshairs, as well as the guests. So good move. And believe it or not, this is only the 5th time since Disney opened in '71 that they're closing down. The other ones because of hurricanes. One time, the day of 9/11, after the planes hit, they decided because of security reasons to shut down that day also.
You know, Gary, it was interesting. I can see the spillover effect that people are canceling Disney cruise bookings and trips to Orlando. You can see how the wave and the domino effect here, but I'm sure that same with Universal, SeaWorld, all these others that concentrated there. So that's a pretty big, important city. And Florida, of course, is a very big, important state on top of Texas and what happened to Harvey. Is there going to be an economic hit from all of this, or do we rebound with the rebuilding and all the stuff that comes afterwards?
I would suggest, number one, in Orlando, short term. You know, we're big on tourism. That's obvious, but it'll come back very quickly. The cruise ships have shut down, and that'll be for the next few days. That'll do some harm. But this state is one of the great states of this country, and it's always bounce back. People flock to here, whether to live here or visit here, and that's not going to change because of this. And once it passes by and we do get out of hurricane season, I think all's well. But as far as, you know, the property damage, that's going to be real random, and I suspect there's going to be a lot of it, unfortunately, and that's going to be a long time to come in putting that back together.
Yeah, oftentimes, and I don't want to sound callous here, that's the kind of thing that you know, builds a lot of economic activity later on, the rebuilding effort, the getting back to normal effort. What do you see happening?
I guess there's always light at the end of the tunnel. There's a reason why Home Depot and Lowe's and Whirlpool and Sherwin-Williams and all those stocks were kicking you-know-what today. We're already looking forward to after this about how to, you know, fix things up. But as I said, a lot of property damage. Now next, how to fix that damage up, and there'll be a benefit to it. Of course, you never want to see this happen, but you always got to look at the light at the end.
Floridians do. STU. All right.
We do.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Secretary. I apologize for that. Where Irma's headed right now, the latest chip that has a lot of people feeling relieved and a lot of other people feeling now very, very worried.
During the move 2017 clearance event, you can do endless online research about the CT6. Or you can come in and have it all for less than you might imagine. Don't wait. Our 2017 models will be moving fast. You can drive a car, or you can
This is a reference to Francis, which was here in 2004. And then Floyd, this is if Floyd doesn't come, we did this all for fun. Actually, Floyd did not come. But I think the hurricane with the old lady last name of Irma will be the one that comes to all of Florida, at least if that's what we say. And the boards are up along as we go, all the way up the way here. And then we'll walk, because I'm going to throw some VO on airlines, and then we'll end up at the one avocado kitchen there that's got weird board ups over here.
All right, we might have lost that. I apologize for that, Jeff Locke, but he is everywhere. He's going to continue with our coverage, as we will this weekend, of course, when this whole network is going to be live. By the way, myself included, all of these fine people included. The Miami Beach mayor is next. He had some very strong warnings and urgings, and he said he would follow up on them. He's here to update us.
Tennis training has evolved in really weird.
The congestion is not apparent. The town is looking like a ghost town, thank God. I never thought I would say leave Miami Beach, but those are the words we've been saying for the last 4 or 5 days, and people are listening. Of course, you have holdouts, but this storm is so aggressive, so massive, so powerful. We want people to leave the beach. We don't want heroes. We want people to be alive.
Yeah, and I like how you put it too, that those who would stubbornly insist on staying are endangering, obviously, those who want to rescue them or have to rescue them. But I'm wondering, there are many who stay, and I've talked to a few on this network, on Fox Business, Mayor, who, especially elderly who live in high rises, for example, who feel that they're safe there. It's not as if skyscrapers are going to come tumbling down. How do you address that? How do you reach out to them?
Well, Neil, I'll tell you today, I've been all over the beach. I've spoke with our homeless people, some of our special needs people, but I also visited some of our senior centers. And in one particular, I went up to, I think, the 5th or 6th floor. There was one older lady who's 92 years old, who wouldn't leave, knocked on her door. And I said, Anna, you need to go. You need to leave. Of course, I said it in Spanish. She's Hispanic. And she said to me, alcalde, which means mayor, I'm not leaving. I got my water. I got this. I pleaded with her. I said, listen, Anna, here's my cell phone number. If something happens, you need me, call me. And she turned to me and she said, Mr. Mayor, here's my cell phone number. You called me if you need me. And that shows you kind of the spirit of the people of Miami Beach. But we want them to live. We want them to be safe. So far, we're getting tremendous evacuation. This is going to be something very serious. We want to protect our people.
Well, it's a good goal, and you're a good man, and obviously you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, Mayor. Hang in there. My best to your people and everyone else in your fine state. Be well.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, Mayor Levine, we'll be following this. Shep is coming up right now. But in the meantime, I do want to let you know we'll be back here again 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, right through noon. We'll be looking at what this storm could be and what it could mean for everyone else across the country, the real human impact, and, of course, the financial impact. Both worlds having you covered, as will this entire network. We are there live every single step of the way. Everyone's sticking around, not only for Floridians who need it, but everyone else who wants to learn something about this, from this, the people who are in the path of this. Here's Shep.
I'm Shepard Smith. National Hurricane Center has just released a brand new update on the storm. Winds still 155 miles an hour, but its forward motion has slowed and its direction has changed, now headed due west. The big question, when does it make the forecast turn north? For that, here's Mark DeMaria, head of the Hurricane Center, live from Miami.
This is Mark DeMaria with your 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time update on Hurricane Irma from the National Hurricane Center. As of 5 p.m. this afternoon, Hurricane Irma, the max winds remain at 155 miles per hour. Remains a large and powerful Category 4 hurricane. It's now moving a little bit slower as of 5 p.m. It's moving about 12 miles per hour in more of a westerly direction. Again, should be approaching the Florida area tomorrow and into Sunday. Looking at the track, we haven't updated the graphics yet, but track is basically the same, maybe even a little bit west of what we showed at 11 a.m. this morning. We've extended the hurricane wind warnings up the coast, and now extend as far north as just south of the Tampa area on the west coast, and a little further to the Flagler County line on the east coast. Again, because it's a very large hurricane, we expect wind effects on both sides of Florida, particularly in southern Florida. With the slower motion, slightly slower motion, and maybe a bit of a wider turn, we might see the impacts coming in a little bit later than we were thinking on the previous advisory, maybe more like Saturday afternoon and into Saturday evening. Again, because it's a large storm, we expect the conditions to last in South Florida for 24 to 36 hours. We also have to take into consideration that we expect this to remain a hurricane well up the coast and even into central and northern Florida into Monday timeframe. And then further up, we expect this to be a possible rainfall threat into southeast U.S. Moving on to storm surge. We have the storm surge warning area again for just south of the Tampa area on the west coast and up the east coast. Again, because of the westward shift in the track, we really want to emphasize the very vulnerable southwest Florida area. We're looking at possible 8 to 12 foot storm surges from Captiva area, Boca Raton. We're expecting lesser storm surge values of 3 to 6 feet. Water is going to be a particularly big issue for this storm, even on the East Coast, with rainfall amounts in 8 to 12 inches, with local amounts up to 20 inches. So the combination of with the strong easterly flow building up the storm surge in combination with possible inland flooding it's really going to be two types of flood hazard along the East Coast. That's why it's especially important to heed all the advice from the local officials to evacuate when you're told to evacuate. Even if you're in a high-rise building along the coast, where you are is where you're going to be stuck if you have the combination of the storm surge inundation as well as the rainfall. So again, it looks like this is going to be in the Sunday timeframe for the South Florida area, spreading northern Florida into Monday timeframe. This concludes the 5 p.m. update. I'm Mark DeMaria. Thank you.
Well, a lot to go through there. Mark DeMaria, obviously, from the National Hurricane Center in Miami. And again, a number of changes with this storm. The storm was headed west-northwest at 16 miles an hour this time yesterday. This morning, it was headed west-northwest at 12 miles an hour. Now it's headed due west. I should have said 14. This morning, now it's headed west at 12 miles an hour. What does this mean? It means it's going to make landfall with Florida a little later. And because of the change in the movement that they're now projecting, it's sounding as if this is a storm still going to impact all of Florida. Everybody is still within the cone of uncertainty, but there may be a larger impact, as he said, for Southwest Florida. Show you what it is they're talking about now. Remember earlier we were talking about this storm coming ashore about Marathon Key, Duck Key, Big Pine Key, in that area along the middle keys, middle to lower keys in Monroe County. That's not what they're suggesting anymore. All of this will be affected. Everything to the right-hand side of the storm is the worst side, but everything will be affected. But the highest probability of landfall has changed, and it's now somewhere between Key West and Big Pine Key. Another thing to keep in mind, the size of the eye was about 25 miles wide. Wall is where those strongest winds, he talks about news at all. So here's kind of what we're talking about, coming ashore between Key West, Big Pine Key, and then where 3 days ago, and pull this out just a little bit more, clear and off, not the best with the technology, much better with the, here we go. So coming ashore right about here, and then Naples and Marco Island, Fort Myers, up into Lee County, northern Lee County, up into Charlotte County. This is more looking like now the highest impact of this storm may be for you. Huge skyscraper, high rises, condos, a lot of elderly people and others, vacation makers in Marco Island and certainly in Naples. If this eye wall ends up making its way there, that's certainly very bad news for everybody in the Southwest Florida area. But consider how wide the eye wall is now. The eye is about 46 miles wide. Now remember, from Naples over to Fort Lauderdale is 100 miles wide. So 45 miles of that, it's half of the peninsula at that end, and then making its way up through Fort Myers, up into Lee County, Port Charlotte, and then sort of tracking toward the center of the state. And then as we go north, instead of heading directly up into the Atlanta area, they're now talking about this storm making its way over toward the Georgia line, around Alabama. So all of this will feel the effects. Certainly everyone in Florida will feel, they believe now, hurricane force winds at some point or another. Those who haven't yet evacuated South Florida are now getting set to hunker down in shelters. Dozens of those shelters set up all over the state, in schools and churches and community centers, havens of last resort for those who have nowhere else to go. We'll get to our weather center in just a moment. First is Steve Harrigan. He's in Miami Shores, Florida, where it's windy already, Steve.
It is windy already with a long time to go, and this storm already has people's attention here based on what it's done. It's already been a killer storm through the Caribbean, killing more than 20 people and showing its power to devastate buildings. More than 40 shelters in Miami-Dade are open. They can house more than 100,000 people, and remarkably early for storms like this, they are filling up and filling up quickly. Not everyone, though, is going in. I spoke to a woman earlier today with 3 dogs. She said the dog shelter in Broward was already full. So some people deciding to stick it out their pets. Other people here really concerned about the tough choice they have to make to get on the highway north, either on the Florida Turnpike or I-95, with questionable gas supplies, and also concerns about the traffic as well. In some places moving just 5 miles an hour. So if you want to get up to St. Augustine, like one man I was speaking to earlier, he finally found a hotel. People really feeling the stress here across South Florida, and they're left at this point with a very difficult decision to roll the dice one way, get on the highway, worry about gas, can you find a hotel room, or to stay here where they could be facing 10 inches of rain and a possible 10-foot storm surge. I saw one man actually checking the sea level of his house with a GPS out in front. It was 12 feet above sea level. If we get 10 inches of rain and a 10-foot storm surge, a lot of these one-story buildings could be underwater. I saw a woman also constructing a safe room in her house with mattresses in a windowless area. A Category 4 storm, if it hits here, would be able to rip the roofs off of houses and also rip away some side walls and some buildings. That's not even talking about mobile homes. So people here facing life and death, and you see it when you talk to them. You can hear it in the nervousness, and it's really a contagious fear at this point, Shepard.
Steve Harrigan, live Miami Shores, Florida. Steve, let's get straight to our what do they call it? The Extreme Weather Center. Our own Rick Reichmuth, our chief meteorologist, is there. Rick, some changes here.
Couple changes. That westward kind of leaning certainly kind of continues. One thing, there is now a storm surge watch. It's a new thing that's being issued by the Hurricane Center, storm surge watches and warnings. But the watch now, this isn't that graphic, by the way, I'm just giving you this information, goes all the way up into Tampa. Tampa is a city that is really prone to storm surge. If this storm tracks farther, but a lot of water into all of these bays here that are really susceptible to that. So Naples, certainly one of those places. If there would be any good thing, Shepard, that would be possibly put the worst of the storm surge here around the Everglades, which could absorb a little bit of it. And there's not a ton of population right at least in that very spot. That said, hurricane warnings everywhere you see the red, hurricane watches everywhere now extending up just towards Daytona Beach. We will see hurricane force winds throughout the entire peninsula. Want to show you this, a Cat 4 storm, still looking well organized. So we're right on that edge. We've been seeing some rain bands begin to get closer and closer, but none just at the point. One thing I want to show you, Shep, so maybe it has a little bit of an interaction here with land if that does happen in Cuba. Bad news for Cuba, but would weaken the storm out just a little bit. Let me go back here because I didn't put a stop in my graphic there. Now it is forecast at some point to be a Cat 5 again, at least the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Not saying that that will happen, but a Cat 5 potentially right there on the shore when it, there you go, Cat 5. That's 2 a.m. Sunday morning, barreling down here on the Keys before it moves up possibly towards the west side. And you said it, then afterwards goes up in towards visible satellite image still continues to be amazing. This storm being this strong for this long, Shep, is something that we've never seen anywhere across the globe in the satellite era. And usually these strong storms we see in the Pacific Ocean impacting places like the Philippines and such, those super typhoons. Seeing this here right on our shores is certainly frightening, but Florida under the gun. It is a daytime storm. That's one little bit of good news. When these storms happen at nighttime, it's a very scary thing for those who stayed, which hopefully most people did not. But if you're there and it's happening in the daytime, that certainly would probably feel a little bit better as you're dealing with it.
Talking to folks down in the Keys earlier, a lot of hardy folks in the Keys never leave for these storms. And if you consider, right now they're saying somewhere between Key West and Marathon, they just don't know for sure. But 155 miles an hour on this overseas highway, all the way up Duck Key, the whole way up through the Keys, all the way to Key Largo. It's hard to imagine what would happen to that overseas highway and the entire economy that's so marine-based for all of the Keys. Tens of thousands of people living down there, Rick. It's quite frightening.
It's really frightening, and you're right that we don't know. We know that it's going to make this right-hand turn. Everything is based off of that. We also did not think it would be moving due west, which it is now. So if that continues, that due west motion, that would potentially make that hard right turn maybe a little bit harder to make that turn. And that's why the models have been pushing a little bit farther and farther off towards the west. I will tell you that our two biggest models that we like are in pretty good agreement, maybe about 20 miles or so apart. That's good agreement unless you're on one side or the other of that 20 miles.
All right, Rick Reichmuth in the Extreme Weather Center. Rick, thanks very much. The head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency with a stark warning about the hurricane ahead.
It's not a question of if Florida is going to be impacted. It's a question of how bad Florida is going to be impacted and where the storms ends up over the next 4 to 5 days as it passes inland.
The FEMA director, Brock Long, with us live next. And don't be put aside by this track. All of Florida will be impacted from coast to coast, the entire peninsula. If the forecasts hold and the governor warns, be ready to go.
You always pay your insurance on time. Tap one little bumper and up go your rates. What good is having insurance if you get punished for using it?
For drivers with accident forgiveness, Liberty Mutual won't raise your rates due to your first accident. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
I could tell right away ZipRecruiter was going to make hiring a lot easier.
Go to ziprecruiter.com and post to over 100 job boards with one click.
the risk continues the farther south you go, expecting 5 to 8 feet in that highlighted area. That's why the evacuations issued east of Route 1. That 5 to 8 feet, that is above the surface, though, so that's what you're dealing with. With this storm surge. Could be life-threatening. That's the biggest problem, the biggest concerns here with these storms. 5 to 8 feet to the south of Key Biscayne. It gets even Palmetto Bay. There's that extreme storm surge risk. This area is very prone to this, and this is ahead of the storm. So when we talk about that storm arriving, they're moving up the coast and inland there through Sunday. Well, this will be happening before that with that strong east wind, that strong wind pushing all this water inland, and the risk continues there around the Florida Peninsula. You can see that can rise several feet in just a few minutes, and that weighs nearly a ton, so it can easily move a car, just 1 to 2 feet of a storm surge. Today we're into the mid-80s and we're climbing into the 90s. Another hot day as you continue to prepare, and just a few showers developing, but the timing of when we'll first see those first outer bands of the storm coming in. I'll look at that a little bit later.